Hello everyone and welcome. Today I've got the Volvo XC60 and we'll be doing a review of this car. It's an all new car from the Volvo range and it sits between the XC90 and of course the recently announced XC40. It's a very important car, this one. About a third of Volvo's global sales are accounted for by the XC60. So let's first of all take a little bit of a closer look around it. Hey, I tell you what, I think this is a really good looking car, really good looking replacement for the XC60, which did look a little bit mumsy, if you like, before. But look at the way this one sits. I mean, the wheels really feel out those arches, and I just like the way that, it's stanced. It's a bit more of an aggressive, more sportier look about it. It's got an elongated feel to it, with that long bonnet and the sharper creases, although apparently the wheelbase is actually shorter, so I don't know how they've done that trick, but definitely a more flowing, more fluid shape, certainly a sleeker look and a more substantial presence. So I do really like the way this car looks. How much can you get into one of these for? Well, they start at 200,000 dirhams. That's for the 254 brake horsepower 2-litre 4-cylinder engine. They all have 2-litre 4-cylinder engines now, but that's a 254 brake horsepower. 200,000 dirhams is about $67,000. The next one up is a 320 brake horsepower 2-litre 4-cylinder. That's the twin charge unit, turbocharged and supercharged. And you can get into, that's called the T6, as you can see from the badge on this one. It says T6 on the back. I don't know if you can make that out. That you can get into from 250,000 dirhams, which is $68,000. That's for the R design model. This one, of course, is the top of the range car. It's the Inscription, and I don't know if you can make it out, but it says Inscription just on these sides, the chrome bars along the side there. And this one sets you back a little bit more. It's 275,000 dirhams, which is about $75,000. Now, having said that, looking at the local dealer prices here in the UAE, there are quite substantial dealer discounts or dealer deposits on the car. So I think it's to do with the financing structure here. So before you dismiss the car out of hand, if the prices seem a bit high to you, I would recommend you go down and have a chat with the dealer. So let's first of all see how practical it is and take a look at the boot. So I could open the boot with the key, which is this one. I do like the way Volvo do their keys. It reminds me of like a sort of a spy camera, a microfilm camera from the 1960s. But you can just use the button there. It's powered, of course, and inside you find a pretty big boot with a white carpet that is sure to get dirty very, very quickly indeed. Under the floor, you have a space-saver spare wheel with room for the tools and maybe a couple of spots to hide stuff if you want to. Over here, you've got a first aid kit and a power supply, and you've also got a little hook there to hang stuff. There's an elasticated strap here to hold stuff into place, which could be quite useful, and these buttons over here basically drop the rear seat. 60/40 split folding seat. So let's watch this in action. There you go. That's pretty violent actually. So let's get into the rear cabin space and see what it's like. Here we go. Let's get this headrest up. There you go. That's much better. Volvo do perfect headrest, don't they? Even in the back. So let's see if I can get this up with one hand. Oh, it's quite a substantial and heavy seat, but the seats are so good in Volvo, so that's not really entirely surprising. The seat belt just about fitted into space perfectly. They of course have child seat Isofix anchor points in these things. And here we have a center armrest with the tray. We get cup holders here. Pull-out cup holders, a little tray there, and also just a little flat box there. Maybe put like a small tablet or a phone, and a little ski slot here to let you put long items reaching into the boot. Back here you've got a net for the seat. You've got deep door pockets, speakers, and you have your reading light and even a hook to hang things. You've got an AC vent on each side, so that's quite good. And down here you've got a little tray to put stuff, coins and things, I'm not sure. A lighter, which is a bit odd, but more sort of, it's quite a nice looking lighter though, I've got to say. Quite nicely done. but it's more probably you could put a power supply in there. But you do also have, this is a cover, you slide the cover down and you have a 3-pointed plug in there. So no USBs, but you have a plug. So I suppose, you know, theoretically you could just put an adapter in there and use that as USBs. But it's fairly comfortable. This seat is set for me, so the position for me here, sitting behind myself, I've got plenty of room. It's got a full-length sunroof, by the way, which I've got the sheet drawn, but actually, you know, you could have a nice airy feel in this cabin. The only thing I would say is that my shins are just touching the sort of hard base here. That's quite hard, and that could be an area of concern perhaps, but plenty of room for my feet. Knees are okay, headroom is good, so actually quite comfortable. Time to get in the front. Here we go, over here now in the interior, and I just want to show you the startup routine on this car, although because it's already connected, it's already coming on. But let me just show you the instrument panel. There you go. All digital, of course. You get a big old map in the middle. It's telling me that I haven't put my seatbelt on, so that's what it's telling me there. I can press the button here to get rid of that, and then it should go back to the map. There you go. The screen, of course, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I've done this before. If you want a detailed description and analysis of the infotainment system, look back at our Volvo XC60 review, because that was the first time that Volvo introduced the system and we covered it extensively in that. But suffice to say, it's very easy to use, very intuitive. This one's got a 360 all-round camera, which is extremely handy and very easy to use as well. I like the way they've done this one. And then you've got your climate control. It's all very intuitive, very nicely done. You can do stuff like this. It's got parking. It's got lots of driver's aids, that's for sure. That's your menu button. You've even got a pull down menu there where you can do settings and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a lot on there. There's a lot of things, cross traffic alert. It's got, I'll go into pilot assist and other things in a minute. Really nice seats. Oh, avoid dropping my phone there. Really nicely done seats, as you can see, really nicely contoured. I do like the way these are. These are adjustable. They're power adjustable, these seats. Over here you have a little space there to put stuff. And then you have this huge, long, empty cabin, little cubby box there with a lighter. Again, a nicely done one. This could be a power supply. Auto start stop, electronic brake. This is your drive modes. We'll go into that. Actually, if I just press it there, you'll see you've got eco, comfort, off-road, dynamic, individual. You can just set the individual parameters, but we'll leave it in comfort because that's the sort of car it is. Over here you've got another deep box and then 2 USBs here. This one is for fast charging, and those are quite handy. And you've got a CD thing if anybody needs that anymore. This is your start stop. So the interesting thing about the start stop, if you saw me when I started, you turn it this way to start it. So you think you might have to turn it this way to stop it. No, you actually have to turn it that way to stop it. That's odd. So anyway, let's get it back on again. And on the steering, you've got your cruise control on this side with the information that comes up on here. You've got buttons here for your stereo system and computer control. If I press that, then you can see the there you go, the trip meter comes up there, and all of that stuff comes up there. So the interior is really nicely done. I do like this is nice. It's got this sort of crystal glass touch feeling. This is your stereo control, volume knob, but really very little buttons because everything is handled by this. You've got tweeters up there. So Bowers and Wilkins sound system, really nice, good quality. I love this thing here. This is open pore driftwood, and it really feels like wood, and it's really nicely done. And this actually runs all the way along here throughout the front dashboard. I love also these sort of old airplane propeller blade type central air vent control things. The wood trim also is replicated on here as well. Deep door pockets down here. And of course, good adjustable mirrors and some buttons there. I mean, to be honest, we covered a lot of this in the XC90 and the S60 as well, which pretty much has the same sort of setup. Really, the next thing to do is let's take it on the road a little bit and talk about how it drives and feels. So, there's a slight diesel-y direct injection sort of rattle to it when you start off and when you move off. That's the only bit that you get where maybe it's slightly, you know, the engine sound could be slightly off-putting. But other than that, it sounds quite nice here. And it accelerates very well. Now the thing about it I found is that actually it accelerates better when you depending on the proportion at which you use the accelerator. So if you move off gently, it doesn't accelerate so hard. And you don't think, well, what's all the fuss about? But then if you put your foot down, then it does move. It's got an 8-speed transmission, all-wheel drive of course. It's Haldex all-wheel drive on this car. I wouldn't say it's a dune basher, but it'll do the business if you need to, you know, go off into a sand parking, or you know, maybe a bit of wadi, going into the wadis and stuff like that. It should be fine. Acceleration wise, like I said, you know, it feels pretty quick. It's actually, I believe it's 6.6 seconds for this car, and even the other one isn't too tardy. It's 7.2 seconds for the 254 horsepower version. The steering is nice and light, and again, everything improves a little bit if you like a sportier feel when you put it into dynamic mode, which you can do. And of course, like I said, you can also set up the individual driving preferences as well. The one thing I would say is that the ride on the motorway is very good, but around town it's a little bit jittery, and despite the fact that it's got air suspension, which took me by surprise a little bit. But it's got 20-inch rims on it, so that could be something to do with it. I don't think it's necessarily firmly or stiffly set up. I think it's just the way that it's designed to absorb the undulations of the road. But certainly on a longer run, on a motorway run, it's very smooth, very refined, and of course it's very quiet in here. The other thing about the car, of course, the handling is actually very good for a car of this type, and actually I think it's a big improvement over the previous XC60, and certainly you feel a little bit more connected with this car than you did over that car. And honestly, there was something about the XC60 that kind of put me off, and that was the safety systems in the car, and I'm going to come to that next. Basically, that car started to introduce a lot of the safety systems that we now see in cars, you know, including all the warnings about people moving into your lane and you moving out lane and all of this sort of stuff. But in that car, it was pretty incessant, and it was orally annoying. Orally, I mean in terms of sound. To the point where I would often go through and switch off all the systems because it just was too much. What they've done now is they've got even more systems in this car, but they've made them more subtle. So really, there's just very slight binging and bonging that you might hear. There's little lights that will come up and flash you a little red thing. We've got a head-up display, by the way, which in this car is very handy in that it not only tells you the speed you're doing, but it tells you the speed of the road that you're on because of the satellite navigation. It also tells you where the cameras are. But beware, it hasn't got them all because there's a lot of new cameras popping up around Dubai, and it hasn't got all of those ones on there. But all the existing ones are on there. And also the speeds are a little bit variable. I'm not quite sure where it gets its speeds from, but sometimes they're not quite right as far as I'm aware. But it's got things like, you know, there's one driver assist system which has annoyed me a couple of times. It's done it twice. And what's happened is that it has an automatic standard collision avoidance system. And if it detects an impending collision, it automatically takes control of the car pretty much effectively. And twice what's happened is that somebody has moved across or cut across behind me rather erratically, and the car has automatically responded. And it's automatically responded in that it's taken control of the steering and swerved into another lane. Now, okay, I'm sure that it used sensors to make sure that that lane was clear and empty, but two things. I found it very disconcerting because you took the steering off me, and actually there wasn't an impending collision because that was just somebody driving erratically behind me that was going to cut across the lanes in both circumstances, wasn't necessarily going to hit me. And secondly, what if there was somebody in that other lane and I've just suddenly swerved into it and that wasn't me doing the swerving? So that I found a little bit off-putting. But it does have some other features, such as pilot assist, which is an extended version of the adaptive cruise control. And next you can go through the buttons here and you can have regular cruise control, adaptive cruise control, and pilot assist. Pilot assist basically will look at the road and it takes over the steering and it kind of follows the road around. I say it takes over the steering, but it doesn't let you take your hands off the steering. So if you take your hands off the steering, as I've done in some of the Insta stories that I put up, and you can see that the steering is actually moving and following the road, but what it does is that after a while, or after a very short while in fact, it says please apply steering. Because if it detects that you're not putting any input, so your hands are not on the steering wheel, it detects that and it says please apply steering, and if you don't, then it switches off the system. Which again, I'm not quite sure about whether that's a good thing, because then you're sort of left on your own. And if something has happened to you for some reason and you've let go of the steering, such as if you, God forbid, had a heart attack or a stroke or something, then yeah, don't know what happens in that instance. Anyway, those are things that are coming up in these cars, and that's what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, some of these systems really, you start to think maybe they're a bit too clever for their own good. But having said that, on the other hand, like I said, they are next level, next generation of these systems. They are better, they're more subtle, they're less intrusive, but they are there to look after you. So overall, I think this is a fantastic car. I've had this for nearly a week now, and I've been driving it around, and I've actually gotten quite fond of it in a way that I never did with the old XC60. This car, not only is it better to look at and quite comfortable and so beautifully appointed inside, but there's a connect with it. You know, it does feel like it's an enjoyable thing to drive. And maybe the jittery ride is actually a good thing, because you can see that the camera is vibrating there. Because it does make you feel like you're connected with the road. So there is such a thing as maybe too much isolation. So overall then, thumbs up. I like the car. I think it's really good. Could be cheaper. I think that if they priced it a little bit less, I would say no brainer, go get one. And maybe look for next year when prices might start to come down a little bit as this car starts to become more dominant in the market. Having said that, apparently Volvo have done quite well with this car and it is selling. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that review. Please do follow us on motoringme.com, and of course on all the social media channels. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course on YouTube. But if you're watching this on YouTube, please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you can, please do follow me as well. That would be nice. I'd love to see you there. And I'll put my my handles here as well. Thanks so much for watching. Until the next one.